And hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. The sun is shining here in Boston, so it's beautiful outside. I hope you all are experiencing the same. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Ren Lovegood. I am the Senior Manager of the Leadership Excellence Networks here at NCHL, and I am really glad you're all here today. Just some initial housekeeping items to go through. We had our Bridging Academia and Industry event this past week, or last week, I should say. It was really great. We have some of the recordings available online. I am going to put in the chat just once we get started on our discussions, 2 different links. So if you did attend and you're willing to provide feedback, would love to get that feedback from you. If you did not attend, would also love your feedback just to understand what challenges got in the way and how we can improve opportunities for collaboration in the future. Some additional NCHL business. May 25th, we have a coffee chat coming up. It is in partnership with Cornerstone On Demand and Herzing University. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the challenges of nursing retention, the projected nursing shortage based on the fact that I think about 54% is the current number of nurses are going to be getting ready to retire in the next 10 years. And we're already kind of facing challenges with staffing in our healthcare organizations as is. So we're talking about specifically organizational changes that can be made to try to address this both from a retention perspective and employee engagement perspective, and it should be a really interesting conversation. If you can't make it that day and you do register, the recording will be sent out to you after, so please feel free to register if you're interested in watching it at your own convenience at a later date. Although we have not announced this next event yet, there will be information coming out shortly. We're hosting a panel on June 21st that will be virtual. It's our first ever panel of kind of highlighting some of the data that we have been able to analyze regarding the best organizations for leadership development awards that come out of our National Healthcare Leadership Survey that is run every 2 years. And so for this panel, we're going to have leaders from Intermountain Healthcare, Carilion Clinic, and MD Anderson share their best practices related to 3 of the dimensions that are tested on this or evaluated on this survey: coaching, monitoring and achieving results, and providing performance feedback. The data that we've collected over the years has shown that there seems to be a strong correlation between high performance in these 3 areas. And so we're going to be highlighting the best practices of some of those higher performing organizations, which is it's a new event for us, but it's really exciting as well to be able to share that data with you. Additionally, our NCHL All Member Conference, save the date, has been sent out for November 13th to 15th in Chicago. Our call for content is live. Something I'd really love to highlight is that we are looking to expand the number of sessions that we're offering and the types of content that we're going to be including in conference. And so in this most recent conference, we had kind of those more typical sessions, breakout type sessions where, 45 to 50 minutes of presentation and then some Q&A. We'd also like to explore things like learning labs or workshops, more intensive sessions that are maybe 90 to 120 minutes long, poster sessions. So if you have any fellows or anyone who's engaged in research on your teams who might be interested in a poster session, that's an option as well. We're really trying to get creative with the opportunities for content. There's going to be more information coming out in the next couple of weeks regarding our keynotes, so that will be forthcoming, and we're anticipating that our registration will open sometime in mid to late June. As members of NCHL, you are entitled to a certain number of complimentary tickets for your organization to attend conference. If you have any questions about who you should contact, if you're interested in attending, let us know. If you have a larger group who would like to attend, also just let us know. We can set up invoices, send it out to organizations and such. So we're happy to help facilitate. And last but not least, the Leadership Development Council will now be meeting monthly rather than every other month. The only month that we will not be meeting is in that November month to allow for a time for you to come to conference, and we'll kind of consider that as a replacement for that session. But we have been hearing from members that there's a great need for additional time to get together specific to these leadership development practices, that they're evolving and the needs are evolving very quickly in the healthcare sector. And because of that, we are really excited to be able to offer more opportunities for you to get together and share your best practices, share the things that are on your plate that are troubling you, that you're working on addressing, and opportunities for collaboration with one another. And so I hope that this time will still work for most of you. We have really great attendance on every other month, but we're really looking forward to this. And I am just going to pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions for the ton of information that I just threw at you. All right.
Maybe everybody's still digesting.
Yes, and that's okay. I will send this back out as well with all of our notes after our session today, as well as with the recording. And as always, please reach out to me at any time if you have any questions. I hope that some of you will consider submitting for the call for content. I'd love to hear more about the work that you're doing within your own teams as well.
Not being on the committee or that reviews the content, I actually was going to say, I hope that all of you submit something because it definitely makes it interesting. I know that everybody who joins this meeting has really cool things that they're doing that we all get the benefit of hearing from when we're on the call, and a conference is a great time to share that at a broader scale. So don't if you're thinking, gosh, I'm not sure if we are mature enough in this function or that function to do that, I would just say go for it. The worst that can happen is we say not this year, but that might end up being a session that we do here in this meeting or as a coffee chat or in some other way too. So it can't hurt. We last year submitted way too many applications just because we got carried away. But I will say that even just the conversation around what kind of things to submit was really valuable for our team and helped us focus where we wanted to put our energy and attention as a team for the year too. So it's definitely a worthwhile exercise.
Thanks, Alice. All right, so without further delay, we will get into the presentation and conversation today. UPMC, thank you so much. I am really excited to have you highlighting two kind of programs that you're working on, both the Leadership Podcast series in terms of being a strategy for leadership development, and then a micro-learning series around performance management. And so I think the hope is, we'll talk about each of these for, 10 or 15 minutes. And then I think there are other organizations on who are likely considering or maybe launching similar strategic initiatives. And I'd love to hear how we could learn from one another in those areas.
All right, so I'll take it over with the podcasting strategy. For those that didn't meet me, this is my first meeting, and I'm also sharing our strategy here at UPMC. So my name is Jennifer Kennedy. I'm a senior learning specialist on the learning and development team, and lead with a group of 5 of us, the podcasting team that we've been doing for the last couple years. So I wanted to come on to share with you all what we've been doing, the impact that we've had, and then a little bit of behind the scenes of how we create and then publish our podcast. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Oops, do I have the ability to do that? Yes. All right, can you see my screen there? My PowerPoint? Okay, perfect. Got thumbs up. Great. Wonderful. So as I mentioned today, I'll share with you a bit about how we're using podcasting as our learning strategy. And more specifically, I wanted to take a step back first to let you know that back in 2019 or around 2020, when we started looking at a podcast as an idea of what we wanted to do, we really wanted to ensure that our efforts were aligned with a broader HR goal. So as you can see on the screen, our HR goal was to directly support the HR talent goal by providing a unique and learning opportunity utilizing a creative format. So with that, we really thought that the podcast aligned very nicely with that unique and creative opportunity. And specifically, we wanted to highlight leaders within our podcast episodes, their journey, the things that they've learned along the way, and then obviously our audience as well, our leaders. So really the idea was to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness and prepare our existing talent for future roles in needed areas, and specifically with a creative format that people can utilize whenever they would like to at their own particular time. So one of the things that we thought about was how can we create impactful episodes that were relevant to the needs of our learners. And we had one specific episode that I wanted to highlight here, which is our Buddy to Boss one. This is one of our most popular episodes. This one came about because we have our Drive Embracing Leadership training program that's designed for newly hired or newly promoted leaders within our organization. And we have an executive panel that speaks to their particular journey. It's a Q&A portion where the executives talk to the new leaders. And one of the questions that we get over and over again is, how do I navigate moving from a peer to the manager of that peer group? So based off of that information and based off of that experience, one of the episodes that we created was this Buddy to Boss episode. And the reason why I give you that background information is to share with you in a moment, in a couple slides, I will share with you how we select the topics that we have for our podcast. So I believe I have a few minutes. I want to share just a small snippet of our podcast episode. I'm hoping that the audio plays well. I don't do Zoom too often, but I did practice in Teams. I know they're not the same, but I want to make sure that you can hear. So let me know if you can hear, if you cannot hear this audio clip.
We get quite a bit in terms of questions that are asked of us, especially from new leaders. What challenges did you come across doing that movement?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest fears with the role was that in some way I was stepping forward and saying I was better in some way than the team of people that I worked with. And I looked around and I thought, there are some really excellent clinical people here with much more experience than I have. And I felt a little unworthy, honestly. And I think that was one of my biggest holdbacks. You know, besides there being a plan, I felt almost ashamed that I would somehow be raising my hand and saying, it's me, I'm the leader. And it took me a while, even after I accepted the role. So our office areas, we had just some big cubicle area. They weren't even cubicles. It was just a big, long desk area that we all shared. And I took the role on and I kept my desk in this large area. And the manager who had stepped down said, you really need to move into my office. And I said, no, I don't think that's the right thing. I think I need to stay here and show my solidarity and that I'm no different, that I am the same person. And the reality is you are different when you take that step, and you have to be a little different. And in retrospect, that hesitation was emotions in me about how people would perceive me and what would people think I was trying to communicate. And really, that message did not come off well. I needed to be the leader. I had taken that role on, and I needed to step in and be the leader that the department needed. And they had to see a transformation so that they would feel confident in who I was going to become.
So that was just a small snippet of one of our episodes. And the reason why I wanted to highlight that specifically is because it really talks to the power of storytelling. And through the use of our podcast, we're able to hear the stories of leaders and use that as a educational or development tool for the individuals who listen to our episodes. So I wanted to draw some other additional benefits that we highlighted when we were thinking about putting together a podcast. It being effective. It's an idea in a medium that allows for high action and results from what people hear and listen to after that particular episode. Accessibility is huge. Individuals can consume podcasts on demand, on the go, making them especially convenient medium for people to consume. There at the bottom, we have increased engagement and appeal. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, the storytelling is really impactful, and it really creates conversations to reach a variety of employees across our system. And it really appeals to the fact that people sometimes might not be able to take a class on our calendar for an hour of their time, but they can listen to a podcast episode when they need it at that particular time. And then it's also convenient, so they can have it at their fingertips, as I just mentioned. So a couple things that I want to run through in terms of how we design our podcasts and how we publish them are these particular points, all the way from purpose to equipment. And I will share that with you over the next couple of slides, which will help walk you through how we think about these particular areas. The first one is the purpose. As I mentioned, our podcast serves our leaders across the system. And the purpose itself is the anchor for all of our episodes, for all of the content that we create. This is kind of our brand in terms of what we think about as we're brainstorming ideas to bring to the table. We decided that our purpose was to encourage leaders along their path, to equip them as well with irrelevant and effective ideas, to connect them to other leaders and to learning and development. So this is another opportunity for them to engage with us in learning and development, and to obviously stimulate lifelong learning and to continue that development. Our audience are primarily leaders. However, we have a broader and wider audience than that. We have staff and employees, learning practitioners, new hires, anyone who wants to access our podcast can. But when we are putting together our episodes, when we are in our meetings, thinking about what we want to design and what we want to bring forth to our audience, the leaders are the individuals that we have in mind. So we keep that as our core piece that we're coming back to again and again in terms of aligning with the content that we want to create. So speaking of content and the topics, one of the things that we like to, and I keep pressing upon and having discussions around, are topics that are relevant, that people want to hear, that are helpful, that are just in time ideas that people can utilize. So when we are thinking about, and it's interesting because we're in the process right now of mapping out our Q3 and Q4 topics. These are some things that we are keeping in mind. What's current? We are looking right now at perhaps doing one on artificial intelligence. I'm sure we've all heard of ChatGPT and all of the artificial intelligence that's coming out and that we are currently using. So that's a current topic that we want to also be a part of. And so we are thinking about what's current. We're also looking at popular topics, as I just shared in that example podcast episode. That's a question that comes up again and again in our leadership. So we have kind of a pulse on what are those hot topics? What are the questions that are continuing to come up for our leaders across our system? We also are addressing challenges that might arise. Our next one that's coming out in June is all about feedback and how to give feedback effectively. And then lastly, any type of just-in-time learning. So we have our employee engagement survey results that are coming out in a few months. And so how can we create an episode around those particular results and what leaders can do to put those results into action? So these are some ideas that we are discussing when we think about our topics. The style of those topics varies. A lot of it are interviews, as you can see on the left-hand side on styles. We interview leaders Oftentimes we include a lot of storytelling, as we just listened in that example one. We've also done ones with as just the leadership or the podcast team talking amongst ourselves about a particular topic. So we do try to mix up the style to make sure people are engaged and are not getting the same thing over and over again. And we like to look at it as micro learning as well. How can we hit one specific topic really well, so that when people listen to that particular episode, they can walk away taking action on a particular piece, whether that is something that the leader said or something that was really relevant to them that they want to consider in their work context. We haven't done the monologues so much. I'm trying to work with my supervisor for him to do one, but that's something that we're playing around with. And the reason why I want to say that is because we are also playing around with the length of podcasts. Right now, we're at the 25, 30-ish mark in our podcast episodes. We are experimenting with shortening that time frame and seeing if that impacts the number of listens that we get per episode. I have a hunch that when we shorten our episodes, we might increase our listenership. We ourselves have decided to release our podcast on a monthly basis, but obviously you can determine when that works best for you, what that works for us in terms of creating, editing, and publishing that podcast. And then on the right-hand side, promotion. We are still, again, experimenting with promoting, but we do that a lot through our internal social media platform, which is Yammer. We have created our own email list. So every time that a new episode launches, we email those individuals who opted in to hear from us so that they know that a podcast episode was recently launched. And then we also encourage listeners to share. We encourage the guests to share. And one thing that we don't have on here that I apologize is that we partner with internal communications to share it through our organization-wide newsletter or email newsletter. So those are some ways that we are promoting. We're always experimenting with that as well to figure out how can we reach more people with our episodes. And then the last thing I want to say before I wrap up is our equipment. I always like to highlight this really specifically because there's always a lot of questions about what equipment we use. I want to start this by saying using what you have. That's how we started, and that's how we continue to create and publish our podcast episodes. First of all, we're hosting on our internal Microsoft Streams platforms. So we decided to do that because that keeps our podcast episodes internal. We are having conversations about launching it on a platform such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts. For the time being, though, it's hosted in our Microsoft Streams platform. We have purchased microphones through Amazon. I think we have about 6 so that we can send them out to our guests so that they have a quality audio that's coming through so that when we have someone, our editor, edits those episodes, the audio is crisp, it's clear, everyone can hear that well. We do use an editing software, Camtasia, which is a software that's utilized in instructional design. So we already had access to that. We did add a little intro and outro music to kind of update our podcast and elevate that for ourselves. And then we do use Teams for project management. They have task cards internally that we do use to keep us on track of our steps for creating this podcast. So I'm hoping that was valuable. I know that that was, short kind of intro to what we do, but it has been a really great medium to use in addition to supplement our current learning that allows time for us to hear the stories of our leaders and reach people exactly where they are. So thank you so much. And I appreciate the time to be able to share our podcast as a learning strategy.
All right, I saw a lot of comments coming through in the chat. Does anyone have questions? Are you running similar initiatives?
I wasn't able to see the chat when I was presenting, so I apologize. I'm reading through it now.
We've utilized podcasts as well for DEI topics. and they've been very successful. We currently have annual required training going on across our health system, and we have a number of different learning formats. One of them being a podcast on a DEI topic, cultural awareness on transgender. And I've received a lot of comments that it's very meaningful to people. So I think the leadership topic area is another great topic area that we can explore.
In addition, we've also done like 5 tips under 5 minutes. So it's just like that really short micro kind of a learning type of thing, which has been pretty successful as well. So. But I love the podcast, the longer length, because like Megan said, it's worked well for the DEI, but definitely in leadership, it'll be good.
We've used it on a social, to socialize some of our medical education work and some of the publications that we've done in the medical education space, as well as interviewing different physicians, just short nugget bursts about what's happening in the healthcare space. And it's been great for our associates to lean into that information. And we've done other learning content as well. Totally agreed on everything that was said about the benefits of using podcasts. And Jennifer, exceptional presentation. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'll add that.
Oops, go ahead.
Go ahead,
I'll
Justin.
add that at the University of Minnesota, we actually have an assignment in our technology class where students actually learn how to host a podcast and create their own podcast in hopes that they can use that technology going forward in their careers.
We try to do it monthly, but ours is called Leadership Academy Connection. And we try to keep them 3 to 5 minutes. Actually, I think the longest one we've ever produced is 4 minutes, but just short nuggets of information, whether it's get on the balcony, don't should on yourself, don't look backward with regret, look forward with optimism. Just little nuggets that we try to send out, and then also include links to either blogs or other useful information to accompany those short bursts of information that we send out.
And thank you, Jennifer. This was an excellent presentation. And I'm with Henry Ford Health, and we do not do podcasts. We haven't even thought about that. And so I'm like, wow, this would be great. We've just started doing a series. It was leadership or women in leadership, excuse me. And it was interviews of our top senior C-suite leaders that are women. And we kept the bites from about 7 to 8 minutes for an interview. And we take them, we're based out of Detroit. And the filming was at different locations that meant something to that leader. And so it really became alive, and that was very successful. But to be able to do podcasts where, it's maybe a little bit more in depth and easy to, click on. So thank you very much. My wheels are spinning.
Yeah, Cynthia, and that's exactly how our podcast really came about too, was through that Drive executive panel. So we had executives sharing their story, sharing some best practices and takeaways. And that's an extremely popular portion of our leadership training program. And so we were thinking, how can we take that and expand that to a larger audience for those people who are on the journey of leadership? And I like the comment in the chat box about even early careerists. Those individuals are still listening to our podcast. So I like that. And that's kind of where our idea came from.
We're actually about to launch something similar. We had looked at the podcast and actually came up with almost a modified version of both, Cynthia and Jennifer. We're doing reflective conversations. So we're doing 25-minute conversations with leaders that will be videotaped, but can also be audio listened to, available on audio as well. But it's really aimed at, it's an 84,000 person organization. Some people have never met some of the senior leaders or heard from them directly. So it's really to humanize them in some ways and just make them more personable to the people that they're leading and the people in the organization. So
And I'd like that, I was gonna say, and tapping into like all those senior leaders, when we used to have leadership academies, when we had a panel of senior leaders, that was one of the best segments. People are just hungry for that information. So thank you.
Yeah, Jennifer, I really appreciated your presentation. One question I had for you and the whole group, I guess, that's on here, just as we're talking about different innovative ways to get learning out. I'm actually working on a blog post right now on this topic of leveling the learning playing field and making sure that everyone has access to learning. I hear a lot of conversations where we're focused on leadership development, but the majority of our workforce are not leaders. And I'm really curious to get the group's thoughts on if anyone has done anything beyond compliance training. There was a really interesting McKinsey study released last year that basically says over 57 million Americans are employed at an hourly level, and they want to grow and they want to learn, but they're not essentially being given access to those resources. And they make up more than half of the US workforce. So I'm just curious if anyone's doing anything in that space, and if you're not, maybe other than the obvious, like, they're hourly, we have to budget, we have to have labor and compliance laws, right? If there's other things you're doing to get the hourly workforce engaged in learning.
For UK healthcare, we have done something. We use DDI for learning content, and we created some sort of pathway for non-leaders where, just different topics that they can use for personal development, whether it's emotional intelligence or communication. It is all online, so I know that's not ideal, but we wanted to provide them something. I think we called it your professional pathway, something like that. And it's worked really well. I end up sending out information about it quite often.
Northwell Health also has a couple things. One of them is recently, actually probably about a year ago, the launch of LinkedIn Learning, so that anyone throughout the entire organization could access LinkedIn Learning. And there may be others on the call here that are doing it. But the thing that was most recently done is, so we have that leadership development pathway that has one program for frontline leaders, one for leader of leaders, one for executive leaders. And what has been, just because of that demand and that whole emerging leader population being so vast, our frontline leader program was really opened up such that you don't need to be a frontline leader. You can be an emerging leader. You can be, not even a team leader, but that you could openly access those curricula. So, you could go ahead and register and take, participate in that program without being a leader. So essentially you're learning those fundamental leadership skills and competencies without needing to have that formal leadership role.
And that's fantastic. And did the system essentially, how did you work around the challenges of hourly, number one, like scheduling time for them to actually access the learning and then paying them for that? Were there, because that's the challenge that I hear a lot from, and I'm just curious if anyone's been able to overcome that in a creative way.
I would say culturally at Ohio Health, we have had some great support of allowing our associate that development time. So we have been socializing that for long before I joined the team, of making sure that leaders have an understanding that their team must be developed, and we have to make that a priority by allowing them the time to do so. Now that's easier said than done, especially when you're talking about frontline workers like the nursing teams and things of that nature. So we've done something different where we started adding different learning initiatives at different hours of the day, so second, third shift time, so that makes it more accessible. So we're branching out into doing more in that space. We too have an emerging leader program, and we also have an associate development track in general, where we offer associate development opportunities all year long, whether it's recorded opportunities, in-person opportunities, and live broadcast opportunities. So it's a culture builder piece. So I would say one of the things that's helped us is top down, having the support that this is important and actually putting some feet behind it by making the way. And then we met them halfway by adjusting schedule, by doing things at different times of the day. Super early. I was on a 6:30 the other day because, that is when that is accessible for some people. And then we'll do something late in the evening at 6 o'clock. So just being versatile in the time of offerings, as well as that culture building piece of making this a priority and really meaning that, has been a game changer. So I'm hoping that can be helpful in some way.
No, that's great. I love the fact that you're talking about meeting the learner where they are, because I've worked in 3 organizations where the majority of the workforce is hourly and works, doesn't work a 9 to 5 shift. And so for some folks right in the corporate office, it's really hard to get out of that mindset of like, I'm only here to support 9 to 5 versus like, I will meet the needs of the workforce and meet them where they're at. That's great.
Kim, I'm curious, did you find those folks participating in the kind of off hours, if you will, sessions, that they were mostly people that would normally work on those alternative schedules, or were they some of your day jobbers that were working all day and then coming at night or in the evening, or vice versa kind of thing? Because, I worry about that too, right? We have the night shift people that come into a class and it's always like, no, you should have the night before off before coming into this, and they often don't get that. But so I'm just wondering how that's what you're finding on those sessions.
I'm finding that it is the off shift that will come. So that has been more attended, although it's almost equal. And so we've also had the persons that it is their shift, yet that's more convenient for them. I'm participating in something on Saturday. So, it's hit or miss for if it's their shift or not. Making it available and building I would say the cadence of offering it at the unique times should build participation as well.
Right.
So we just started really focusing on that. So as the word gets out, as we continue to share and make more of those opportunities available, then we should see more people participating. When we do it during the week from the 6 to 8 p.m., that definitely gets people who are in their shift, right? That hour, the early morning or before shift, or the people who already served their shift. And we do like a 6:30, 7 o'clock piece. So and we're just dabbling into it. So I'm hoping that the attendance increases, and we're happy for anyone who can participate.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you for asking. Great question. And we'll continue tracking that and be able to share more as we continue to go down that journey.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And Jess, I'm not sure if you were also prepared to talk a little bit about the performance management micro-learning series that you're working on.
Definitely. And I'll be pretty brief so we can have some time for the rest of our agenda, because truly you got to see the main event, which was Jennifer, and the incredible work that she and the team have done on the Lessons to Lead podcast. She is being very, very humble. And just to share a little bit of insight about UPMC, if you're not familiar, we are based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but we have presence all across the state, into New York, into Maryland, and have employees in almost every single state, as well as some international presence in Ireland, Italy, Kazakhstan, China, and now Croatia. And so while we have 40 hospitals, 800 outpatient sites, 95,000 plus employees, probably at least 11, 12,000 of which are leaders with direct reports, and of course, lean, mean learning and development team to support all of that. Jennifer and her colleagues have done an incredible job, I think, of really creating those personal connections with our learners as much as possible. And that's a big scale and scope to tackle. But these podcast episodes have received thousands and thousands of listens. And so they continue to really look at what are the topics people want to hear and the leaders to highlight. And something that I think has also been really well received is that the leaders highlighted are often not our most senior leaders. They're more mid-level, and that resonates more with our broader management group, really feeling like they're hearing from others who are in it with them. So I'll transition into just a little bit about this performance management learning series. I am hesitant to call it microlearning. Many of you have shared already the dabbling that you're doing in microlearning. It's not a new space. It's newer for us, I will share. We certainly encourage learners to get out into LinkedIn Learning and just search for kind of maybe those snippets of video that they might need to use on a certain topic. But for us, creating microlearning videos, this is a relatively new space for us. So I'm going to try to share my screen here just to show you a couple details on what we've been doing. So hopefully, can you see that now? Can you see my screen?
No, we don't.
Not yet. Okay, let me try that again. This one, share. Oh, I got to click the share button. We're Teams users, so you can hear both Jennifer and I. Like, is this how you do it? Okay, so we. Just a little bit of the why. We have launched this performance management learning series this year. We're here on partners, likely some of you are as well. So we have the opportunity for an annual survey to a large scope of our leaders in the health services area. So over 1,500 leaders in the organization, if not more. And this year, last year, we included a leadership skills self-assessment. And that gave us some really good information and insight into where multiple levels of leadership were seeing some gaps in their leadership skills. We know that's just part of the picture, right, to assess the needs, but it helped us to land on some really key areas that they were saying, help us, please. So Jennifer shared some of our podcast and also just sharing that we've got, of course, we've stood up a lot of really robust learning opportunities. So we provide this really comprehensive catalog of virtual instructor-led sessions for both staff. So happy to talk further about that, Cheryl, if you're interested, and for leaders. And we've got LinkedIn Learning. We've got a number of resources that are available. But what we consistently hear, as many of you I'm sure do in healthcare, is the challenge of time. We don't have time, we don't have time, we don't have time. And this idea of even having some type of shorter supplemental learning to reinforce key takeaways, to push out or cascade to levels of leadership, this was a need. And so we took that and the feedback that we had heard from that survey to launch a micro-learning series or a monthly video series on a performance management topic, because we felt like those overarching skills that were identified could be bundled in that sense. So these were the things that we keep in mind as we build each of these videos. We use Beyond, which is an animated video tool. We answer one overarching question. So some of those to date have been, how do I effectively evaluate my employees? How do I have effective performance and career development conversations? One overarching question that guides the content development of the video. We're aiming to keep them under 10 minutes max. I know that's what sort of disqualifies in the traditional microlearning best practices, but trying to keep it under 10 minutes. And we're also trying to keep them as evergreen as possible so that we're staying more philosophy focused than we are, this is what you do in our HCM system, but giving them the overarching guidance they need. So we've been partnering with our internal communication colleagues, also some of our key leaders, chief nurse executive, hospital presidents, to push these and really promote them as they become available. So just a couple snippets here. These are some of our videos to date. what they look like. We have this consistent refrain at the start of each video. We ask the question, we reinforce what a culture of effective performance management looks like. It engages, develops, and recognizes every employee that serves the individuals that we serve. And we're still working on those measures of success. Utilization, are people actually using this? Is it impacting behavior change? And certainly we're hopeful to see some of that feedback when we get the opportunity to do that survey again later this year. So this is just one component of overall learning strategy, but wanted to share a little bit about it. And of course, hear your own kind of foray into microlearning, how you have gotten great traction with it, other best practices to share, et cetera. So that is what I wanted to run by you in a nutshell. And now I have to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. I don't know how. I see. Stop sharing. Let's go.
I gotcha.
Oh, thanks, Ren.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate it. Questions, feedback, any challenges that you've faced with microlearning too?
It's just a challenge, right? It's so hard to meet the need of what people need in such a short burst, and at the same time make it meaningful. So yeah, it's just a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, Terry, to what you were just saying, I think if it's micro learning, that's almost created and curated in more of like a curriculum, maybe one that's not super structured, right? But that, for example, right, if you had a DEIB curriculum and you had a series of 12 micro learnings, right, where you can still get what you want in terms of creating awareness and changing behavior, but not in the traditional, 2 to 3 hour class, that they can go in and take it 5 minutes at a time. But yes, if it's just a standalone micro learning, right, and there's no other support wrapped around it, yeah, I think we all struggle with that.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Cheryl. That's the end goal, is that it will be this overall series of microlearning videos that can be accessed as they're needed and sort of build on each other. And we're in that active building process right now, which don't we all love that? It's like figure it out, build, deploy, keep going. So hoping that it gets to a point where that can maybe be a package of learning that a new leader can access, or so right now it's housed on our intranet, but at some point we may move that to our LMS for assignments in the future.
Yeah, and it's interesting, we at Cornerstone, we eat our own dog food, and so we of course we go through our annual training on sexual harassment. And I've been taking sexual harassment training for better part of 20 plus years, and this was the first time I've taken it in micro learning, but there were 18 total courses to complete, but they were all 2 minutes. And it was such a different, engaging way to, even though it was mandatory, and I'm like, okay, I can imagine this not being mandatory and just being a subject that I want to learn about, but I'm gonna only get 10 minutes here, right? Or 5 minutes here. So yeah, I think just like you said, just building out that series.
Justine, is your hand up?
Oh, sorry, go. Yep, sorry, just.
Well, that's okay. I'm curious, what other changes do you see around training in light of moving to podcast or micro learning formats? For instance, I'm thinking of space and spaces. Where do individuals take this training? Can they go on a walk? Is it more iterative? I'm just wondering what other changes have occurred because of the new formats.
It's a really good question, Justine. And for us, it's for our desk list, which is a new term that I've just heard in the last couple of days that I love, which describes so many of our employees. It's always a consideration, right, that we're keeping in mind. And that's part of, if anyone does want to talk about how we've kind of stood up things like LinkedIn or communicated the podcast even, being careful that, yes, we do want leaders to carve out time on the job, because don't we all want our employees paid for their time spent learning? The other thing, though, that we've been conscious of is kind of making it available. And LinkedIn Learning, you can access 24/7. So if it's going to be helpful for you to, on the shuttle on your way in, watch it on your phone, right? We're trying to kind of share some of that accessibility, where we know we may not always get the ability to have that person get carved out dedicated time, which is ideal. We know that's really where we want to go, but also want to ensure that people see that as an overall benefit and something that's available to them. But I can't say we've fully figured out how to build it in to the work all the time, right? Get that buy-in and support.
That's great. Thanks. I've been thinking about the connection to workplace well-being as well. Like, if there's a gym, can you go on the treadmill, or can you go walk outside with the micro learning format and the podcast learning format, and just what other innovations could come from this newer format?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of technology out there, learning technology now that's mobile first, right? And so I think, yes, for sure, like anything that you could listen to. I mean, for me, like if I could do all of my mandatory training on podcast or like Audible, right, I would just go take a long walk. But then I think also, like when you think mobile, that is an opportunity where, like I sit for 20 minutes every day at the bus stop waiting for my kids, right? And I could literally, that would be a perfect time for me to sit, and I have done it before, to take training or learn something new. And that's like the desk worker, but like even for deskless, I think it's important going back to the Ohio Health, I was talking earlier that like, I think it's a fine line. Like we shouldn't expect somebody on their lunch break, right, when they're hourly, to clearly sit there and like do training. But, how do we give them more of those opportunities if it's not an in-person training, but maybe even through a phone or through a device where it can be easily accessed?
I have to jump off. I was just going to say thank you. This was really helpful and good discussion. And it's nice to see we're all kind of like figuring out all these different ways to try to reach people in the best way possible. So thank you. Appreciate it all.
We have about 2 minutes left. I know that everyone is likely in back-to-back meetings. Are there any burning desires, major things you'd like to bring up that I can maybe help with before we see each other again on June 8th? All right. So I think what we will do is close out a couple minutes early so you can all have a few minutes of silence. Go grab yourself some water or some more coffee. I will send out just a follow up with any additional links. And again, information just on the upcoming conference. I hope you'll consider presenting or submitting content, and let me know if you have any questions. But have a beautiful day. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the weather. And take care.
Thanks so much. You too.
As well. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.